Good evening, everyone. Acts 21, and we will pick up in verse 19. We look back and think for just a moment about what Paul has gone through up to this point in his traveling, preaching the gospel, establishing congregations, encouraging their faithfulness, helping to ordain elderships in those congregations to help them maintain their faithfulness, to have those who would watch for their souls, and to do that work. And Paul speaks about some of the things that he has gone through. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 then would conclude with he has every day the cares of those congregations. And so that weighs heavily upon him. He has also endeavored to bring a gift from primarily Gentile congregations back to Jerusalem and Judea, for the Jerusalem church to be able to distribute those funds as they are needed during this time of famine, during this difficulty that they are having. And certainly that is part of an effort to hopefully soften the hearts of those who would receive such a gift and such help from Gentile congregations, and so hopefully to unite those social backgrounds of congregations into one more fitting church as it should be. And I think that is certainly was one of Paul's heart's desires, if you will. And to bring those folks together. He has, nearly everywhere he has gone, he has had those who, not necessarily Jewish Christians, but Jews, who would rise up against him, stir up the people in the community, and it would certainly on several occasions would cause him either to be run out of the city, on one occasion to be left for dead, to be left outside the city, left for dead, on a couple of occasions to have to go out by night. And what could possibly help this volatile situation, if anything, could help this volatile situation? That's what we're about to encounter in the next few verses, is what is supposed by the eldership at the Jerusalem church to help that situation. And not just with Jews, unbelieving Jews, but also hopefully to help with those many Jews who have now obeyed the gospel. Because at this point in time, Paul has been gone for quite a while. Maybe up to 6 years. Paul has been gone from Jerusalem. We might say several thousand have obeyed the gospel. Many of them are either in that area or are coming back to that area, Pentecost. Same reason that Paul was wanting to get there for this time frame was because so many Jews would be coming back to Jerusalem. And what a great time, if you will, to be able to help those who are in need and for others outside of the church to see that beautiful gift that was given by primarily Gentiles. And so hopefully trying to break down that volatile situation. And that's what Brother Wayne Jackson in his commentary on the book of Acts. And if you're looking for a good commentary, Wayne Jackson's Acts of the Apostles from Jerusalem to Rome is excellent. It's not the only one that I have that I use quite regularly, but he has a great section dealing with those upcoming verses, and so I'm going to use some of it. I want to read some of it, and I hope that you'll bear with me on that tonight as we have this discussion about what transpires next. Let's read these verses and the next, and then we will start commenting on it. It says, when he had greeted them, so just to see, this is the next day. So Paul went in to see James and the apostles, and the elders, I should say, not the apostles. The elders are the only ones mentioned here, not the apostles. James is likely one of those elders. But we have James probably being mentioned, probably because of his prominence, even with Acts 15, what took place with the council at Jerusalem. James makes some comments there, and they're going to solidify what was stated even back then in Acts 15, so as to, there's no confusion over that. But Luke records that James was here and all the elders were present. And when he had greeted them, the eldership then, he told in detail those things which God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord. And that's kind of where we stopped last week. They glorified the Lord. They heard all the work that had been done. They heard all the things that, all of the many converts that had taken place, all of the congregations that had been started, and how they were growing and progressing and so forth. And so when they heard that, they glorified the Lord. And they said to him, you see, brother, how many myriads of Jews. And so we're talking about thousands now. How many myriads of Jews there are who have believed. And so this is a word that is used here, talking about those then who have obeyed the gospel. Those who are now Christians. There are those myriads of Jews who have believed, and they are all zealous for the law. I would say that was probably a normal thing. There's nothing new here. On the day of Pentecost, back in Acts chapter 2, when those Jews obeyed the gospel, guess what they were still zealous for? They were still zealous for the law. That's all they have ever known in their life, is the law of Moses. Hard to just give up on those things, right? And so, but notice what they say here. You see, brother, how many myriads of Jews there are who have believed, and they're all zealous for the law. But they have been informed about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, nor to walk according to the customs. What then? The assembly must certainly meet. They will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we tell you. So here's a suggestion. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them, be purified with them, pay their expenses so that they may shave their heads, and that all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing, but that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the law. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we've written and decided that they should observe no such thing, except that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, things strangled, and from sexual immorality. And so from fornication, in other words. So again, because of this problem, if you will, among Jews and Gentiles, that is now a problem in the Lord's church, this is what is suggested by the elders. And I will tell you that there are numerous of suggestions about this particular issue and about this event. What exactly is taking place? Did Paul sin by doing this? Did he give up? Did he have a moment of weakness? Did he give up on Christianity and go back to the law for a moment? Was he trying to walk both sides somehow? What was taking place in this? And that's what we're going to discuss and hopefully come to at least some type of understanding of what takes place. I will tell you that it does seem that this is part of the Nazirite vow, Numbers chapter 6, that these four men have engaged in. And that, but before we really get into that, I want you to understand that whatever we might say about Paul on this occasion, if we say that Paul sinned in doing this, and I'll just tell you, I'm not there, but we'll talk about it. Then we're talking about James and the eldership at the Jerusalem church also sinned because they're the ones who are suggesting it. And I dare say then those four men who are there taking this vow, they also would be included in that who have sinned in this. But Paul does make mention of this later in chapter, I think it's chapter 28, that he mentions it again. He mentions about being there in the temple and those Jews who've come from Asia, which you'll read about in just a moment. Those Jews who come from Asia who are going to stir up the people, they take Paul. And so he mentions it again a little bit later. And so I have a hard time suggesting that in any way Paul has sinned in doing this. However, that is one of the ideas that people have put forth. Here's a couple of things. Some suggest that the event never happened, and in other words, that Luke fabricated it for some apparent reason. That one we'll just skip over because very clearly it has happened. Others argue that the apostle was sincere in yielding to this procedure, and he simply did not fully understand at this point that the law had been abrogated. And I don't believe that's the case. We'll talk about it. Many allege that Paul, in a moment of weakness, knowingly sinned, reacting to the pressure of this eldership. Some contend that the apostle's actions were a matter of expediency. In a unique time period when certain elements, particularly civil and ceremonial elements of the Mosaic system, were gradually passing away. And Wayne Jackson makes a statement. He says, perhaps no suggestion is entirely free from difficulty, and I will tell you that is the case. Spent several hours just today, but I've spent the better part of a couple of weeks kind of looking over different material and thinking about these things. But here's what we know that seems for sure here. And McGarvey, by the way, is one who contends that the apostle was limited in his knowledge at this point. I would beg to differ from the standpoint that he has already written 2 Corinthians chapter 3 as we know it. So he's written 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, probably Galatians at this point in time. Has not penned Colossians, and if he is the writer of Hebrews, he's not penned that yet. But he has penned Galatians, and he has penned 2 Corinthians, in particular chapter 3, and there is quite a discussion about the law. So to say that Paul did not have an understanding of the law is just foolish. I don't know where McGarvey would come up with that. If he were here, I'd debate him on it, but I don't get that at all. I think he understood and fought against the law being... You have to understand, what has Paul been fighting this whole time? He has had situations where he's had to fight this whole time about this very issue. And so this is nothing new. And so Paul, I think, completely understands the truth of the matter here. Not only that, think about Peter even for just a moment. Let's set this up thinking about from Acts chapter 2 to Acts chapter 10. No Gentiles have been taught in that time frame. Acts chapter 10 gives us the first Gentile conversion that takes place. And what has to happen for Peter to even get it through his mind that he should go to the household of a Gentile, Cornelius, and teach him? He has to have a vision directly from heaven 3 times. Not once, not twice, 3 times, right? Rise, kill, and eat, Peter. Not so, Lord. I've never taken anything common or unclean. Peter, don't call what I have cleaned common. He had to learn that lesson and be directed by the Holy Spirit. Go meet those men who Cornelius has sent to the house. By the way, they're out front waiting on you right now. And he goes down, right? And he goes out there, and the next morning goes with those men and goes to the household of Cornelius. And there's a household of people waiting to hear words whereby they must be saved. And so there's a period of understanding. I would tell you that in Paul's case, however, he has been fighting this particular issue. It's not that he has an issue with this and a lack of understanding. There have been very well respected men, and there may be some of you that believe that Paul did sin in some way in this. C.R. Nickel wrote that he had sinned in this on this occasion. There are numerous others who believe that to be the case, and they simply say, well, Galatians 2 talks about Peter sinning. Well, if Peter could sin, certainly Paul could sin. Yes, he could. But we have no clear indication that he did. The Bible is very clear about Peter's situation and Paul having to withstand him to his face, remember? But we don't have that with this, and so we need to be careful about assuming that Paul has sinned in some way or that these other brethren have. Here's a couple of things. And this is dealing with the idea that Paul may have sinned in this. If Paul is indicted of sin, then again, as I mentioned earlier, so are James and the elders of the Jerusalem church, because they asked him to do it. Even if the apostle did err, the mere recording of the transgression would not make the Bible culpable. It is not a sin to record the commission of a sin, certainly. And while it is the case that even an apostle could sin, one ought to be careful, as I mentioned a moment ago, about saying such. We don't have explicit testimony to that fact. But if Paul erred in this episode, then why would he even bring it up later in his own defense? Why would he bring up something that he did that was sinful in order to defend himself later? In Acts chapter 24, I think I said 28 earlier, but it's chapter 24 and verse 18. And if that's the case, was the apostle led by the Spirit to defend sin? And was Luke inspired to write of Paul's being led by the Spirit to defend a sin? That just does not logically sit well. It is possible Paul went through the ritual as an expedient matter. Again, like we kind of set up the conversation, what could possibly take down this level of hostility with the Jews and the Gentiles? What could help that situation? And so most people will say that it was a matter of expediency, why Paul would purify himself in this way. And again, this from not a religious standpoint. Paul clearly knows, and the statement that they have made that these now believing Jews, that they've heard that you teach to forsake Moses and that you shouldn't circumcise your children, your Jewish children, and so forth. And so they have this in their mind, but Paul has never taught any of that. In fact, we know that he circumcised Timothy, but not Titus. And so you have that situation. I might have those backwards. I think I do, actually. But anyway, he circumcised one, did not circumcise the other. And you have that, I think, being a matter of expediency. Did he teach that circumcision, in fact, was nothing? Yes. But he did it as a matter of expediency because of who he was going to on one occasion, and to make a point on another occasion that it was nothing, in fact. So we can see both sides of that. And so there is, I would say, Paul has some Christian liberty here in this particular matter, whether or not he does this. Then there is the question as to what exactly was being done. Because typically speaking, to end a Nazirite vow, now typically a Nazirite vow was at least 30 days or longer. But there were situations where it was done shorter. We might look back and say, well, it's a possibility that in Synchrea, where he shaved his head, remember? That ended that period of that vow. You could say, well, that may have been even a Nazirite vow at that point in time. I'm not 100% sure, and we're not told, so it's hard to speculate that. But the questioning of the timing of this may seem to indicate that it is, in fact, a Nazirite vow. But to end a Nazirite vow, there are at least 3 sacrifices or offerings that take place. One of those, by the way, is a sin offering. Now, you might start to see the issue that I've had for a couple weeks now. Paul, is he offering a sin offering? Thinking that that's how he's going to be saved, how his sins are cleansed or washed away or rolled forward to the next time? He knows better than that. He's taught the truth on that particular issue. But there are several others. There's a peace offering as well as a lamb that would be offered and so forth. So there's 3 different, I think one of them's called an olach, the elevation offering, and then the peace offering, and so forth. And then after that time was done, then they would go before the priest, and the priest would shave their head. That would be the end of the vow. And that hair that was shaved off would also be offered as part of the peace offering, if you will. And so it would be burned in that way and offered as a peace offering. So there's several offerings that go along if in fact it is Nazirite vow. Again, I still do not believe that whatever this is that Paul has sinned. Again, the fact that he has taught very clearly against it, and what we have now, clearly the law has been nailed to the cross. Ephesians chapter 2, Colossians chapter 2, we know that to be the case. Well, we can look back at that and know. These Jews that have question about Paul, this may very well be that opportunity where we read in 1 Corinthians 9, I think about verse 20, where Paul starts talking about, I became all things to all men. I'm going to tell you that is probably the simplest, and it's the best answer that I can give concerning that. Whatever he did participate in, and by the way, it did not mean that for those 7 days that he is sitting there in the temple, he was walking around town during some of this time, and we know that because those Asian Jews that come down, they see Trophimus with him walking around town. Remember, because they're going to take that and they're going to say, well, we just assume that he's taken a Gentile into the temple. We've seen him in the temple. We've seen him walking around town with a Gentile. And so he's taken a Gentile in there. By the way, that was very clearly marked outside of the temple, and there were different court areas, but it was very clearly marked as to no Gentiles being able to enter in beyond this mark, whatever it was. And if they did, they could be put to death. And so if they entered in, in fact, you can go back and do some research, and there are Greek inscriptions, and part of a sign had been found in capital Greek letters, so uncials, that tells us that it goes back before the time of Christ, and in that sign that was part of that sign that was found, it is very clear that a Gentile that enters in beyond this does so with his life in his own hands. And by the way, that was one of the things that the Romans would back the Jews up on, entering into their holy temple. If a Gentile had done so and they caught him there, by the way, if you look forward in a couple of verses, you find that when those Jews come from Asia, they rush and catch him in the temple. And so inside the temple, and the doors are closed behind them, and you might say, well, maybe to keep others out, but very likely to keep him from going out. And inside that area, he is probably as close to death at any point that he has been, because he very clearly could be put to death with very little trial effort at that point in time. Anyway, we'll get to that part here in just a moment. But what comments, what questions do you have? Might have overcarried the Nazirite vow and this offering and such, but wanted you to have the background. Want you to know what questions are out there.
What jumps out at me is his time is running out, and he knows that, and he's trying to preach the gospel. And so you have this uprising that's about this conflict that's forming, and he's smart enough to know that this thing's about to go off the rails, and I'm going to get thrown into prison, and all that's going to happen. But he's trying to buy himself some time so he can actually preach the gospel. So the last thing he needs right now is to get wrapped up in this issue on the law and what these men are doing and all that. And so I think it goes back to, as you said in 1 Corinthians 9, he became all things to all people, and went all people, and that kind of thing. And I was trying to think if there would be an example of that. If you were studying with, let's say, Buddhists or something. I don't know that there's Buddhists in Maryland, but I suppose there might be. And you're studying with them, and let's suppose in their faith system they take off their shoes when they go to worship. I don't know that they do that, but let's suppose they do. And you invite them to Eastside Church of Christ, and they want to come. They want to come and see what we do, and it's a great opportunity for us to teach them. But at the door, they start to take off their shoes, and we're like, "Why are you taking off your shoes?" We don't have to do that here. That's not part of the New Testament that you have to remove your shoes. We could spend the next hour in the foyer debating with them over the removal of shoes. Or we could say, you can sit right over here, come have a seat on the pew, because we're getting ready to teach you the gospel of Christ. And so you can see how you can get caught in the trees and the forest. You get caught up in this side issue. And I don't think the people that are doing this are saying that everyone must do it. They're not binding it on anybody, on the Gentiles. Paul's certainly not binding it on the Gentiles. I think he's just saying, if that's what you need me to do, to live another day and preach the gospel, then let's do that. It's not going to harm anything. So.
Yeah. And where has Paul been, primarily, for the past, say, 6 years? With Gentiles. And evidently these 4 men were also needing to be purified. It was common practice in order to come in fact, it seems to indicate that someone needed to go on their behalf and cover their expenses. They, because they were not cleansed, were not purified, were not able to go into the priests, and therefore someone needed to do that. And so the elders say, hey, Paul, this would be a great opportunity for you to do that and to take care of that. By the way, this was, I know it's not in our normal reading, and so we don't see it as common practice, but this was very common practice. This was not just this was a one-off deal right here. These four men and then Paul joining them. In fact, King Agrippa, you remember King Agrippa, right? Who Paul goes in front of in a couple of chapters. King Agrippa, Josephus records that King Agrippa did the very same thing, that he went in this fashion and paid for these sacrifices and took this vow as well. And I think that gave him at least some leadway with the Jews, even though he was a politician and basically worked for Rome. This gave him at least some credibility as a Jew before other Jews. And so Josephus records that, not too much later, the time span. So with that in mind, and the idea that this was commonly practiced, it shouldn't be at all taken to see anything nefarious taking place, that Paul slipped in some way. I think it is a great teaching opportunity that takes place, and just the fact that the elders at Jerusalem make the point, concerning the Gentiles who believe, they've already written this back in Acts 15. We have written and decided they should observe no such thing. But we're not going to bind the law upon them, is the point that they make. And so there's no other binding of the law. And so the elders are not proposing that in whatever this might be. That's not taking place. So, but that they should keep themselves from things offered to idols, from blood, from things strangled, and from fornication. Yes.
I look at it as like essentials and non-essentials. I mean, we all know that Paul was strong in his convictions, and he does not believe that the things of the old law are what going to save him. And I don't think he, like you said, his vow, he did not believe that vow was what was saving him. He was doing it as a, kind of like Steve said, just to make him feel better, or to, so that it didn't cause a stink or whatever. And I just think we get caught up sometimes in what is essential and what is not essential.
Yeah.
We debate those issues when sometimes we ought to just get in and say it's not that big a deal.
Well, and I would say to separate the two issues, this was ceremonial and not religious. And if we can understand that, then I think we can get it.
These individuals were coming from a faith that was correct
Yes.
into a faith that was correct, but it was new.
Yeah.
So they were growing out of that. And where is that knife that slices it right down the middle? I don't think there is one. We see that throughout the history of the New Testament church. It was evolving, and we see that in Acts chapter 19 with those individuals that were baptized after Pentecost and John's baptism. They had to be taught.
Right.
But it's just like us today. If we want to teach someone, we can't go up and say, "You can't do that. It's wrong," and beat them up about it. We have to do it in love. We have to teach them in love and show them.
Right. And I think that's the difference between saying that denominationalism is acceptable and therefore we could, we can cross back and forth over from one to another. We can't do that because denominationalism has never been right, whereas Judaism was correct under the law of Moses, and Christianity is correct, as the point that you made. And I think that's a good way to look at this and to understand that there are differences. In fact, in the Hebrews letter, those differences are made very, very clear. What's the difference between the old law, that brought them to Christ, as Paul would mention in Galatians, but as the writer of Hebrews makes clear, it always served a purpose. It had a purpose to bring them to Christ, and if it was possible that it could still be in place, then it would. But it's been taken out of the way, and I think that what you find is that, and I've seen some writings where people were very, harsh, if you will, against Paul. And I'm not sure that these were, quote, Christian writers. They may have a Jewish slant or background themselves. But anyway, but those particular writers who basically castigated Paul for what he was doing, saying that he was actually showing that it was far superior. And of course, that's not the case, and we can see that very clearly. But he was saying that it was okay to go back to that. But that was, the Hebrews letter teaches us, we've got to keep moving forward, right? Moving forward unto what? Perfection, right? Hebrews chapter 6, verse 1. And so not going backwards to those rudimentary elements of the old law is what he would talk about, those things that brought them to that point. Now, in folks' background who come out of denominationalism, they typically learn some very wonderful and basic things, right? About there is only one God, right? Jehovah God. And that He sent His only begotten Son. I mean, those are facts that you can't say, no, you got to forget all of that because it was taught by a wrong group. No, those are things that you can continue to pull forward and grow on those foundational elements. But denominationalism as a whole, or occultism as a whole, those things are wrong, and we have to turn away from them. Now, the difference in Paul here is he is giving in to simply a ceremonial act of purification, and so as to say, hey guys, I respect the law of Moses. Now, he could say that all day long, but that's not going to get it right for most people. Because in their minds, well, the Jewish elders or the Jerusalem elders here, they know, hey, these people have come and they've told us, or they've probably written letters, they've talked about it. There are people that are there that have already told them to say, that Paul, I mean, he's telling people among the Gentiles, he's telling Jews that are there, forsake Moses and so forth.
I think you have it right. Within, I think it's like 6, 7, and 8, within the Hebrew letter, right, you have a comparison between Melchizedek and Jesus, and Moses and Jesus, and that flow to a more perfect way, right, more perfect kingdom or law or way, and I think there's one.
Appreciate it. I think when we get it, the kind of draw back the curtain, see the big picture of what's taking place, we can understand pretty simply why Paul would do this. And I think the illustration Steve made a moment ago is helpful in that. I wouldn't debate about taking off shoes as long as that's as far as they take it. So, all right. So, Jake.
Earlier you said that Paul had made the statement in 1 Corinthians that he became all things to all people, but he also said to the Jews that become as a Jew to gain many Jews.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to what Lee said, he's showing the respect that he has for non-scriptural things that the Jews had in order to bring them about. And we can do the same thing with our denominational friends. Show them the respect of, like, we don't care if you take your shoes off or not. This is why we don't think it's necessary. Or, like you just said, yeah, we all believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but there's more to it than just believing. And we can, not that we can become as them, but show respect to them, like Lee said, with love, so we can gain them to what's correct.
Yeah, that's teaching the truth in love, right? Ephesians 4:15. So, absolutely. All right, well, let's see if we can grab a couple more verses here. And most of this we'll kind of make a couple of quick comments, but we'll run through this pretty quickly. Now, when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, so these are not Jewish Christians, these are unbelieving Jews who have come for the Pentecost feast. When the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd, laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people, the law, and this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. Where was it, by the way, that there was such an uproar? Where they were shouting out, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." That was in Ephesus. Trophimus is from Ephesus, Asia. That's Ephesus, okay, is part of that. And so these folks very well know Paul. And maybe some of the very same ones who have stirred up a mob in that city once before. They're pretty good at it. Yep. It's possible. I would say that it's very probable. Verse 30. And all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, dragged him out of the temple. Immediately the doors were shut. So they dragged him into a court area and out of the temple proper. And immediately the doors were shut. And so here Paul's life truly is in danger. They want to seize him. They want to kill him. They were seeking to kill him. News came to the commander of the garrison that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. And it's, of course, his duty and responsibility to keep Jerusalem at peace, right? To keep everything at bay, to keep everybody calm, and maintain the order of things. Well, this is out of order. This is wild and crazy right here. This is a mob taking place right there at the temple. And there's a garrison that's located right there, close by. And so he immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. So they were already set in that they're going to kill him right there. Then the commander came near, took him, commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and he asked who he was and what he had done. So probably to him, he asked, "Who are you?" To the crowd, he asked, "What has he done?" He's not going to ask someone who appears to be a criminal and is getting beat, what have you done? Because if he's criminal, he's probably going to lie about it, right? So he asked the crowd, "What has he done?" And the idea of the 2 chains, typically that would have been an armed guard on either arm, bound by a chain. That's pretty typical. But anyway, we'll stop there. I didn't get as far as I wanted to through that, but we'll pick up there, Lord willing, next week. Good to see each of you. Please be safe driving home.